So today we're going to be taking a look at the more details of QStar because there has been some more information that I'm pretty sure if you are interested in this secret model, you're going to want to take a look at. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is of course looking at the irrefutable facts as well as some rumors so that we can actually get some balanced information out there to see what kind of picture we're looking at when we are talking about QStar. So one of the first crazy things that happened recently was that Sam Altman actually confirmed that the QStar leak was true. And before this meant that every video around QStar was definitely some intense speculation. But now, in the recent interview in The Verge, you can see that Sam Altman did state that the QStar model breakthrough, he said it was an unfortunate leak, which essentially means that per his wording, this means that the information that came out was unfortunately true. So that essentially means to us that some stuff about the QStar is most certainly true. But that means if Sam Altman has acknowledged this, then that means that there must be other information out there that means that this is true. So one thing that we do know about the QStar leaks is that there was most certainly some kind of breakthrough at OpenAI. Now, of course, this isn't surprising considering that they are always pushing the frontiers on what is possible with AI technology, but it definitely shows us that although yes, on the internet, a lot of leaks do come out to be false, this leak from QStar that was first broke the news in Reuters is definitely holding some weight to it. And I did find the statement from him very interesting because it continued to state that he expects rapid progress in this technology, which means that this breakthrough definitely accelerates the timelines for certain technologies to be developed. I'm not saying AGI, but definitely pushes us forward in that aspect too. His further comment, and you likely did see this if you watched the previous video, he says without commenting on any specific thing or whatever, we believe that progress is research, you can always hit a wall, but we expect that progress will continue to be significant. Now, one of the things that I did want to talk about was of course the letter, and some further information and some further documents have come out that have rounded up some pieces of information. There's one thing that I did want to include in this video because it's something that everyone is forgetting. Earlier this year, everyone may have forgot that Meta's powerful AI language model actually leaked on the same area that OpenAI's supposedly leaked letter leaked. So you can see here, this article from The Verge says that Meta's powerful AI language model has leaked online. What happens now? Meta's Llama model was created to help researchers, but leaked on 4chan a week after it was announced. Some worry the technology will be used for harm, others say greater access will improve AI safety. So essentially, the reason why this is a key piece of detail is because of course this letter, the one that many people are talking about as a conspiracy or some are regarding as fake, which is completely understandable by any means necessary, we shouldn't jump to conclusions. It did leak in the same way that Meta's Llama did leak, and the Llama model leak was actually true. So it does mean that there is a possibility that this leak, the letter, is actually true. And later on in the video, I'll show you some more information that does show us that it could be true. But before we do a deep dive onto the letter, so essentially here you can see that I'm going to take a look at some of the irrefutable facts because it's important to look at exactly what is true, then compare that with the leaks to see if there's any bridge between the two. So one of the first things is that, of course, Sam Altman did confirm the leak is true. Sam Altman did talk about a major breakthrough 2 weeks before. Sam Altman did get fired for a vague reason. Search and planning is the future with AGI. They are working on GPT-5, and Reuters did claim it would harm humanity, and OpenAI have been working on cybersecurity with the White House. So before we do this deep dive, let's take a look at these facts, and then we can remember this as we do analyze the information because it presents the context for analyzing the letter and the various sources throughout the internet to see if this information about QStar holds up with any weight whatsoever. And we're going to come back to this page here because it'll make sense once we're done. So you can see here, essentially, this is a post on 4chan, and this is an anonymous message board where users' identities are hidden. It's just essentially the way how the website was designed. This is a post from a user, and this person says it's strangely technically accurate and alarming more than anons think. And anons is just referring to other users on the website. It says, selects optimal policy action policies in deep Q networks exhibiting metacognition. We did talk about this last time, but he said this means that it selects the policy rather than the just next best action, which is what Q learning consists of. It goes beyond. And then it continues to say, apply this for accelerated cross-domain learning. That is, it was able to change the policy depending on what it was supposed to learn, which is really cool, which means across many different domains and many different categories, it's going to be really effective at learning. Then, of course, custom search parameters, scrambling the goal state. It can decide on the optimal parameters for learning, which is more meta. So it's, just essentially even smarter at learning. Then, of course, we have unsupervised learning, analyze millions of plain text as cipherpairs. This is the kind of data it would process after learning how to attack crypto systems, finding patterns in it. And then, of course, we have cracking AES 192, Tau analysis, Project Tundra. So this is where we do get a bit of information, because previously, although we did analyze the letter, there were certain things that were in this letter that were essentially hidden deep on the internet. And this reference to the claim that is inside the NSA's War on Security by Spiegel, the NSA Tundra project investigated a potentially new technique, the Tau statistic, to determine its usefulness in codebook analysis. So essentially, if you didn't know, when it says NSA, the NSA is the National Security Agency in the United States. And of course, this is a secret project that they work on to, of course, crack the AES 192. And this was essentially an old project that they did have before. So like I said, I'm going to show you guys some key pieces of findings from this document where it houses together all this information. And we're going to take a look at this article as well, because it's really interesting. And then, of course, we do have targeted unstructured pruning on itself, which does seem like something that's quite impossible. But if we've seen anything with these new models, we do know that models gaining superhuman abilities isn't completely unheard of. Although being able to change its complete rewiring is something that we haven't heard of. Then, of course, it says using a metamorphic engine to adapt the pruned transformer model and context memory. And then it links to a Wikipedia page that shows a polymorphic engine, also known as a mutation engine. And you can see on the Wikipedia page here, which shows a polymorphic engine, sometimes called a mutation engine, is a software component that uses polymorphic code to alter the payload while preserving the same functionality. And it says polymorphic engines are exclusively used in malware with the purpose of being harder for antivirus software to detect. So they do so by either encrypting or by obfuscating the malware payload. And of course, the thing is with a polymorphic engines or a mutation engine or a mutating engine is essentially means that this thing is changing all the time, which means that its code isn't the same. And the reason that it does this is because it wants to essentially hide from the antivirus software. So that's why there's a reference to this in this document, which is definitely pretty interesting. And then this last comment here says, if Altman sat on that info and didn't inform the board, it's not a mystery that he got the can. And this would completely explain their crazy behavior. And the reason that this last point does make a lot of sense is because I can't find a single reason that the board would have fired a CEO like Sam Altman if something huge wasn't at stake here. And you have to also remember that it was Elon Musk that also said that he trusts Ilya Sutskever quite a lot, and he knows that Ilya Sutskever's judgment is really, really good. So whatever Ilya Sutskever saw that prompted him to take such drastic action to firing Sam Altman from the board means that it wasn't something that was a slip up, but that it was clearly something that was quite dangerous or something substantial. Then, of course, here we're going to take a look at the cracking AES, Tau analysis, and Project Tundra, because previously I did not see this information on the internet, but now that we do have it, it is a pretty interesting read. Then, of course, you can see here a grave threat to security, and this is on the article. So it talks about how for the NSA, breaking of the encryption methods presents a constant conflict of interest. The agency and its allies do have their own secret encryption methods for internal use, but the NSA, the National Security Agency, is also tasked with providing the US National Institute of Standards and Technology with technical guidelines in trusted technology that may be used in cost-effective systems for protecting sensitive computer data. In other words, checking cryptographic systems for their value is part of the NSA's job. And then, of course, it continues to talk about the thing, AES. So it says, one encryption standard the NISP explicitly recommends is the Advanced Encryption Standard. The standard is used for a large variety of tasks, from encrypting the PIN numbers to yada yada yada. And then, of course, you can see here that Project Tundra, which the letter, and like I was saying, this is of course reference to this part right here, where it talks about given an AES 192 ciphertext by using Tau analysis, which is essentially the method that they previously used in Project Tundra, which is essentially why some people on the internet were saying that this could have been possible, because it didn't just do this out of random, it did this using previous techniques that were being worked on. And the reason that this was really interesting was the fact that we also did have to dig up this information quite a bit. And you can see that Project Tundra here, and this is essentially from a United States leak. So the only way we know about this is because it was leaked from the government several years prior. But of course, that does mean that someone could have just added this to this letter if it was completely fake. And it does also say Tundra electronic code books such as the advanced encryption standard are both widely used and difficult to attack cryptanalytically. And it says that the NSA only has a handful of in-house techniques. The Tundra product investigated a potentially new technique, the Tau statistic, to determine its usefulness in codebook analysis. And this project was supported by Redacted of R21. And I'm guessing that's why it talks about this and essentially says that it used the same method, achieving the goal, which is of course cracking the AES-192 in a way that we fully yet do not understand. Then of course you can see here that it says the fact that large amounts of the cryptographic system that underpin the entire internet have been intentionally weakened or broken by the NSA and its allies poses a grave threat to the security of everyone who relies on the internet, from individuals looking to privacy to institutions and companies relying on cloud computing. Many of these weaknesses can be exploited by anyone who knows about them, not just the NSA. So this is something that isn't new information. Like Project Tundra and all this stuff was information that was revealed ages ago in leaked documents from the United States. And these are from the Snowden leaks, and Edward Snowden basically leaked a bunch of stuff that he thought that the public should know about. So that's why people are having this question that is it possible that since there was all of this leaked data, that with these new AI systems, did OpenAI use a new model and use previous techniques that we further hadn't developed on and then use them again with the combination of new generative AI or potentially a new method to achieve Project Tundra's alleged goal? And of course, there's an article that basically breaks down why this would be terrible. Of course, it goes into detail and basically talks about this. If it is true, it renders pretty much all encryption meaningless. And it basically says it's difficult to explain just how much we rely on encryption in today's world, whether the wires or on wireless or some kind of another. Everything you can send out can be heard by everyone, literally. So your signal is not aimed in one place or another. It's broadcast to the world. And what makes it work when you make your purchase on Amazon, what makes your purchase not someone else's, and what keeps all the thieves away from being able to simply jot down your credit card number as they eavesdropped from where they sit. So, of course, encryption is important because it essentially powers the entire digital economy. And without it, everything falls apart, like literally everything, which means that the entire world is, of course, at risk. And could this be the reason that they said that it was a threat to humanity? Like, could this be one of the reasons? Because I know that many people do talk about superintelligence and AI getting really, really smart. And of course, that being the risk when it comes to killing us or completely wiping it out. But of course, are there going to be other issues that we do face earlier down the line that aren't from superintelligence, that is just from it computing things in a completely different way? So it says we're relying on ethics here. In practical terms, it's not unlike learning that a small group of humans somewhere now has access to teleportation or invisibility or invulnerability combined with immortality. You have to worry about what they might do with such capabilities. And of course, if it is true, like we previously stated in the video, and as many others have stated, this is not something that we do want to be true, because if AES is down, then this isn't good for anyone at all. And then of course we do have to talk about the unlikeliness of this. So we have Joshua back here. So essentially he says here, in a practical sense, a proof of P equals NP may be unlikely, which is a major issue, which is why he said it's unlikely. But cracking a major encryption algorithm could mean that AI essentially has bootstrapped itself to a level of mathematical understanding far beyond the best human mathematicians, and I leave the implications as an exercise. So of course, this is essentially addressing the ramifications of this, and I do find it rather fascinating that many are starting to realize the implications of this, because previously in many different AI documentaries and many different AI videos, we always were met with the question, what happens when AI is able to, on its own, able to just sit there and analyze mathematics, able to sit there and analyze physics, and then able to come up with new formulas, new computations, new ways of thinking, and new out-of-the-box methods of analyzing the world that we live in. What is about to change? And this is, of course, one of the largest implications that many people have talked about, because it's going to change our fundamental understanding of many things that we do know. And the reasons why I don't think that this is something that is impossible in the future once we do have a super intelligence, is because everything we do have right now came through the sort of breakthroughs that we saw through some of the geniuses of our time. So for example, what if in the future we do have people like Isaac Newton, where they make multiple discoveries, like an AI robot, maybe Google DeepMind, maybe OpenAI has a robot that just keeps making insane discoveries in many different categories. Maybe it does stuff like Nikola Tesla, who was able to pioneer the electrical system that essentially formed the basis of modern electrical power, that essentially allows you to be watching this video from anywhere in the world. Just imagine if we do have that constantly, like all the time. And we only get people like that that are able to make certain breakthroughs like once a decade. And we only get people like that like once every 100 years or so. So imagine having something like this, but it's able to do that every single day. We're going to be put light years. And the problem is, we only have people that are that smart that make those kinds of breakthroughs probably around every 100 years or so. And I'm talking about the major breakthroughs that absolutely change the entirety of how we live and how we do things on a day-to-day basis. But what if we could have that every week or every month or even every day? Of course, this does sound incredible, but if that does happen, how fast are we going to move to a technological advancement to where the future doesn't even seem like reality? Then, of course, we do have a few Reddit comments that the article/document does point to, and one of them does say that people are saying that this leak isn't cohesive, but it actually is. If this is a shitpost, it's a masterfully researched shitpost. It says that undirected used concept that it learned to apply them in useful ways in order to better itself and run faster, and it was reinforced with rewards by completing tasks. After finding articles on cryptanalysis, it broke the encrypted MD5 algorithm at a record speed and efficiency. It also mentions data leaked by Snowden, which in it says that NSA has tons of encrypted data on all of us that they haven't yet decrypted yet, because they don't have the tools to decrypt it. And then it mentions that they then reached out to the nearest NSA center to let them know that they were close to having their tools. Basically, the last part is acknowledgement of self-preservation. And that in a way, by saying it has extraneous crap that's wrong in its trained data set, it could remove it without having to remove whole sections, and recommended that it be. And then of course, it re-encode itself with the higher security and design of its own making. Then of course, we do have another comment here that actually did lead us to another piece of information. It says OpenAI does, since very recently, collaborate with DARPA on cybersecurity. Google it. It's called the DARPA AI Cyber Security Challenge. And it says that the letter seems to be written as an internal status report, maybe from some cryptography center of the DARPA. I suspect that OpenAI was willing to train a special version of Q star on DARPA's computers, and they probably gladly gave them the computation time, which is then fine-tuned on research on cryptography. And it says, as far as I have researched things, the letter seems to be coherent and plausible, but written by someone who just doesn't have an AI background, but also one in cryptography. The way they describe what Qualia did, like selecting optimal policies in various DQNs, seems to align with what people speculate about QStar, an LLM trained on math combined with Q-learning, a well-known reinforcement learning technique. And OpenAI has a lot of expertise in reinforcement learning, and in fact this is what they did before LLMs, and they really did do that a lot before LLMs, because in previous videos we did talk about how all of their reinforcement learning exercise led to superhuman capabilities in pretty much any field that they did, where if you manage to remember what they did with StarCraft, whatever game it was at the time, I'm not sure exactly which one it was, but the game that they did at the time. So yeah, you can see here guys that this is Dota 2 with large-scale deep reinforcement learning. And the thing about reinforcement learning is that once it gets to that crazy level where the graph just keeps going up and up and up, and abilities just keep getting better and better and better because they keep getting reinforced in that feedback loop, it essentially does allow for crazy things. And this was something that we previously didn't think was possible, because with Dota 2 the problem was that it required some long-term planning, yet they were able to use reinforcement learning to essentially beat some of the best players in the world. So OpenAI doing some research on cryptography isn't something that's going to be completely impossible, and we do know that AI algorithms are really good in terms of pattern selection and pattern prediction, so it wouldn't be surprising if this is something that they did have a crack at. But of course, this is quite true, where it does say that there is a long stretch from solving grad school problems to solving AES 192. Therefore, I suspect that DARPA spent a huge amount of computational resources in training the OpenAI Q-star model, plus fine-tuning it on cryptography literature. Then, of course, you can see here from The Verge, Google and OpenAI team up with the White House for a cybersecurity challenge. A handful of companies are also opening their systems up to public review. Now, one thing I do find very interesting as well was the timing of this article. So you can see right here that this is August the 9th, 2023, and that is only 5 months ago, but it's only 4 months ago or 3 months ago from where some of these alleged leaks have recently come out. So it says that DARPA launches a 2-year competition to build AI-powered cyber defenses. As a part of ongoing White House initiative to make software more secure, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, plans to launch a 2-year contest, the AI Cyber Challenge, that'll task competitors with identifying and fixing software vulnerabilities using AI. So you can see that a couple of months ago, or around 3 to 4 months ago, they did start working together. Now, it's likely that they did start working together earlier than this, so it's clear that OpenAI does have some kind of relationship with the White House, which doesn't make it a complete stretch to say that they are in the background working on something that could try and break this. It doesn't mean that it has broken it, but we do see a relationship there between these entities. So now we're going to take a look at some more information from this document, because this document, funnily enough, was a document that was created by someone on Reddit that essentially was made to disprove the entire thing. But when making the letter, the problem is that the more they dug into it was that they found that the letter that they managed to find after hours and days of research only strengthened the claims that they found. But if you take a look at their thoughts here, I do find their thoughts very, very fascinating. So it says, the person who wrote this letter, regardless if it's true or fake, has an expert level of understanding of AI research. He uses many domain knowledge terms, but no one seems to find any sort of misuse of the terms by him. It does reference the Project Tundra and Tau analysis, which is a topic that has been discussed very little on the internet, and it's unlikely that a troll would ever touch on those things. If it was a troll, they would have written something that is less likely to be dismissed from the first look and something that is more mematically fit. For example, they would have written NSA Colorado instead of NSA-C, etc. And that is pretty true. Like, I feel like when you're trying to analyze small things like that, there are small instances where if you are going to make a mistake, you would more so use terms that everyone knows rather than something that people have to dive into, scouring Google to see as legitimate. Because if you are someone that's faking something, ideally what you want, your end goal, is for it to be shared around as much as possible. And if you want it to be shared around as much as possible, you're going to use terms that everyone knows. You're not going to use NSAC. You're not going to talk about, Project Tundra and Tau analysis. You're going to talk about stuff that the average user can digest. So it goes on to say, OpenAI basically found a way to break encryption, so they notified the NSA, and the NSA is interested in breaking encryption themselves, which we of course previously talked about. He also goes on to say this could explain the turmoil at OpenAI, which of course I did say, and it does give a very good reason for some OpenAI employees writing a letter to the board warning of a new discovery that could threaten humanity. Remember, that is something from Reuters. So we do know that Reuters did say that something could threaten humanity, which goes to show that if that is actually 100% factual from Reuters, which it probably is considering they were previously right about the Q-Star leak, then that means that it is possible, not probable, but possible, that this is one of the explanations, since this is definitely one of the only things that could threaten humanity in a way that we don't want. And this would explain why they still haven't explained why they fired Sam Altman, because they literally couldn't talk about this. And of course, it goes on to say that this means all information systems, for example, crypto, the entirety of the internet, can now be compromised. And that is definitely one thing that still bugs my mind, like something that I still lose sleep about, is why did they really fire Sam Altman? And what did Ilya Sutskever see? And why hasn't the board given a real reason? It would make so much sense that this is something that they cannot simply talk about. Then, of course, we do have some more information on Project Tundra that we can see when we go down here. So here's where it continues to state that it's difficult to find out why Tundra is even mentioned in the story. It's cited to support some conclusion, but I'm not sure what that conclusion is. Tundra was an undergraduate student project, as the original document makes clear, not some super secret government program into cryptography. Then it references the original document. And then, of course, you can see that this is the document here. And it's actually quite hard to see, but if you scroll down, you can see that Project Tundra is actually here. So this is something that they just, of course, just copied and pasted out of it. But like I said, and this goes into it, like, how could someone go all the way down, find this document, then scroll down to Project Tundra, then talk about it? I mean, of course, it is possible that this leak is completely fake, but I do think that if this leak is completely fake, they definitely went to a very, very long extent to do so. Then it continues to state that what I learned is that the NSA had organized 22 students, and in collaboration with the NSA mathematicians, they tried to solve problems related to classified operational problems. Among them is cryptography. And of course, one of the projects that we just showed was Project Tundra. And it says here are some of the relevant parts from the classified documents. And then it shows here, it says this year's 22 participants were called from 260 applicants. Over 12 weeks, students worked in small teams with NSA mathematicians to develop real-world solutions to classified operational problems. You can see Tundra, a research and of a new statistic, yada, yada, yada. Tundra again here. And then, of course, this is the part from the text. And then, of course, it basically summarizes what we do quote unquote know about this alleged leak. And it says that, of course, one of the resulting projects from the collaboration was Project Tundra, which was, of course, a while back, a new technique called the tau statistic. And then, of course, QStar used the described tau analysis technique, improved upon it to break the AES-192, building on top of the work that was previously done. And that seems to make sense to me. And it goes on to say that this has been another attempt to disprove this 4chan leak, and it failed, only to make this leak more and more credible. It's actually quite true. If you Google Project Tundra, you don't really see anything. It's only when you Google Project Tundra tau statistic that you do see this final thing here, the cryptography stack exchange, and that's one of the only real results that we do have. So it's definitely something that really is obscure, that only a few people would even know about. And definitely, if this is a troll, it's not just someone random on the internet. This is definitely someone that has done extensive research into cryptography. And yeah, one of the key points here, that instead of completely doing so itself, building on top of existing work does actually make sense. And another interesting comment that they do reference here, it says, except literally none of us knew about it until the leak. It took the community days to dig up what it was talking about. And if you look back at the original thread, there's a bunch of people claiming to work in AI, calling it technobabble. And I don't think they were exaggerating with their expertise. The information is niche and specialized enough that using it in context is out of scope for the most perfectly competent AI research. For example, even now that you know tau analysis is a thing, you have no idea how to use that term in context, or how Project Tundra and AI could possibly relate in a nuanced way. You know what the letter claimed, and yet nothing else. And even if you tried to rephrase the leak in your own words, you'd inevitably screw it up and make some incorrect statements that could be picked apart. That's a pretty high standard to set. And of course, 4chan does have a lot of terrible information out there. But like we stated before earlier on in the video, it's before where there were many things that people also thought were fake were leaked before. The Llama model from Meta was actually leaked there. That was why they decided to release it earlier. Of course, the Panama Papers did actually leak there, and more corruption scandals than you can count on did leak there. And as it says, you have to assess the evidence. You can't just turn your brain off the second you hear 4chan. And in addition to this, it does say that comparing the earliest times of the leak from 4chan and the earliest time of the information that was on the internet, it says there's no earlier mention of the QStar model on the internet before that time. The time difference between the first official QStar mention and the leak is 8 hours and 20 minutes, meaning that if the leak was fake and they read the information article the moment it was posted, they would have had to write the leak in 8 hours and 20 minutes, which is not impossible, but not as probable, considering the fact that the information article, I'm someone who literally pays attention to every single piece of AI information on the internet, and I follow pretty much everyone that there is to do with AI news. And I found the information, I think it was about 3 hours, and I literally browse Twitter every hour that I'm awake because I want to make sure that I can find every single piece of information. Like I'm saying, I would have only had maybe 4 to 6 hours to then go ahead and create a leak about this. So is it humanly possible that someone created an unfalsifiable, expertly written leak within 8 hours or 6 hours? This article further dives into something called NSA, which of course we talked about before, but that actually refers to NSA Colorado. And NSA Colorado is a multidisciplined cryptological center that leverages partnerships to produce integrated intelligence critical to warfare in support of national missions and priorities worldwide. And of course, recently it was unveiled that NSA is starting a dedicated AI security center. Now, there was an article on this by Gary Marcus, a leading expert on AI, and he does talk about the OpenAI breakthrough in an interesting light. Now, I do want to state that this article is, of course, more in the more skepticism side, but he does make some very good points. He did state that breakthroughs rarely turn to be general to live up to initial rosy expectations, and often advances work in some contexts, but not otherwise. For example, he's talking about breakthroughs in driverless cars, and of course the previous breakthrough with OpenAI's Rubik's Cube, where they did talk about they had a breakthrough in robotics. So he does detail this and say where previously OpenAI has been on breakthroughs, but they haven't been that great. However, I do want to state that this isn't something that OpenAI has talked about. This is something that did get leaked. So I would state that this instance is definitely something where OpenAI isn't tooting its own horn. Now, one of the other videos that does delve into this topic is David Shapiro's recent video, and I think one of the things that he says during the final statements is very important. Even if this letter is true, like let's say for example that this is 100% true, it's verified, on the off chance, on the 10% chance that this is actually true, we're never ever going to hear about this again, at least not from OpenAI, because if this is a leak, this is of course a issue to do with national security. So this isn't something that the government would come out and say, because they wouldn't want anyone else to know that they've cracked this. Because if you've got a key to open everyone's safe, you're not going to tell everyone, hey, I've got this new key that can open everyone's safe, because everyone's just going ahead and just make new safes or just buy different safes that you can no longer access. So it doesn't make sense for it to be true, for them to basically say, yes, this is something that we now have. And there was another article that I did also find interesting that I did want to cover, which was called the Q-star hypothesis. And this was called the Q-star hypothesis: tree of thoughts reasoning, process reward models, and supercharging synthetic data. And synthetic data is definitely something that I really do want to get into, because it's something that is so fascinating with regards to how these large language models are trained and their data sets. So there's a few points about this, and this guy is a machine learning scientist that has a PhD from Berkeley AI. It does talk about stuff that we did mention before. It talks about that if it is real, it links things from reinforcement learning literature, Q values, and A-star search. And his initial hypothesis, which was a vague merging of Q learning and A-star search. Then he continues to talk about how this involves self-play, which is the idea that an agent can improve its gameplay by playing against slightly different versions of itself. This is something that of course we did see before, which we discussed with AlphaGo. Then of course we do have look-ahead planning, which is the idea of using a model of the world to reason into the future and produce better actions or outputs. And these two variants are based on model predictive control, which is often used on continuous state, and Monte Carlo tree search, which works on discrete actions and states. Essentially, the article continues to mention some other things like modular reasoning with LLMs, tree of thoughts, which is essentially... So in this article, he continues to talk about other stuff like modular reasoning with LLMs, like tree of thoughts, and other methods of prompting. And it was funny because these are the kind of methods that improve the base systems of GPT-4 and many other large language models. And essentially, he comes to a conclusion here after going through a whole bunch of stuff that you can see, but we didn't include, that Q-star seems to be using PRMs to score the tree of thoughts reasoning data that is then optimized with offline reinforcement learning. This wouldn't look too different from existing reinforcement learning, the human feedback toolings that use offline algorithms like DPO or ILQL that do not need to generate from the LLM during training. The trajectory seen by the reinforcement learning algorithm is the sequence of reasoning steps, so finally doing reinforcement learning in a multi-step fashion rather than contextual bandits. And while that hypothesis is definitely very interesting, I largely believe that if Q-star is true, we're not really going to hear about it, because if that AES 192 cipher attack is true, then of course, you know, it's a national security issue which we're never going to hear about. But I do think that this past month and these past 2 weeks have definitely opened our eyes to the craziness in terms of the technological advancements that are going on within OpenAI. Because of course, there was something that was true. You know, he did talk about a breakthrough 2 weeks before. He did get fired for a really vague reason. Search and planning is the future with AGI, which is definitely leaning more towards what Q learning is. And of course, they are working on GPT-5, and Reuters did claim that it would harm humanity. So these are things that are quite true. So if we take a look at these 6 irrefutable facts about, you know, Sam Altman confirming that the Q-star leak was true, confirming that, you know, there was a breakthrough 2 weeks before, the fact that he did get fired for a vague reason, the fact that search and planning is the future, likely going to lead us towards AGI, and obviously largely potentially something new like transformers, some kind of new architecture, and the fact that they are working on GPT-5, and the fact that Reuters did claim it would harm humanity, definitely does place us in an interesting position. But I do think that right now the focus is definitely going to be GPT-5, because whatever that model is, whether it be video, like they did state before, I do believe that GPT-5 is going to be truly advanced in a way that we didn't think so. Either way, whilst the skepticism from this letter does remain high, if there is any new information, don't forget to leave it down in the comment section below, and stay subscribed to the channel for any updates regarding this discussion.